turnaround. Get on your Pinterest, get on your Facebook, get on Twitter, write to your friends. If you're in a lecture hall, you'd have to just sit there and listen. Okay, let's do, there's two things I want to do tonight. We want to catch up on placement, which we missed last week because we're doing freelancer. And we're doing beachhead strategies tonight. So we're still sort of in that marketing. Got a bit to finish off on pricing. Once this finishes this week, we then go into more of the nuts and bolts of starting a business, more of the legal aspects we go into, and we get more into the accounting and finance, and much more into the online, how you should be developing your online presence. As far as catching up together, getting together, it's probably going to be Mondays and Fridays are the only 2 days that I seem to have free. So they're tough nights to be coming, but I'm probably available all day Mondays and all day Fridays. So if any of you can get any of those days, and we'll book it through Facebook. And if you want to catch up with me on a Monday or a Friday, then I'm more than happy to sit down, allow about an hour and a half. We have to do it here, sadly, because I can't get away otherwise. So I'll make that available on Facebook, and you just book the times, and we'll make sure that we keep a calendar so that no one's doubling up, hopefully. Okay, let's talk about placement. So again, placement is one of those 4 big P's, the 4 big P's of marketing. So it's talking about place, and when we're talking about place, we're talking about the distribution channels that you're going to be using, and how you're going to communicate your value to your customers. So, looking at our 3 planning horizons, at planning 1, in terms of placement, we've got to be thinking about what's the easiest way that we can get into the market. You know, don't underestimate how hard it is for a newbie to play in a new market. Almost impossible. So we need to be thinking about strategies, and that's what we're doing, beachhead strategies, later tonight. But we should be thinking about what's the easiest possible way that I can get into the market. So we need to think about that. As we get to the break-even point, we're thinking about network partnership. What partners can we leverage? What strategic alliances can we leverage to get traction in this market and start to establish ourselves? And then ultimately, we have our own channels. You might not want to start with your own channel. You start with your own channel at the start, you might find it very, very hard to get into the market. An example would be, say you've developed a range of cupcakes, and you think, what I'll do, I'll go around to the cafes and I'll try and sell these cupcakes. You know what? You're just one of 3 people that are going to walk into that cafe that day and try and sell cupcakes. Cafes have already established supply lines with certain wholesalers. If you've had your eyes open around town, you've seen vans called Bidvest. Anyone's been in the hospitality game will know that Bidvest have got the wholesale game tied up. So instead of trying to sell cupcakes directly to cafes, maybe you should go to Bidvest and say, would you represent us? And Bidvest are already in the store. They're already a warm lead. They're already accepted person in a cafe. You'll take some margin hit, but that doesn't matter. What you're trying to do is get that traction, that early traction. So that's just one example, but there might be many others, and there might be different strategies that you might look at there. So I usually say to leave your own strategies, or leave your own doing it on your own. Leave that until later on, once you've established yourself in the market. So in the early stage, we are talking about warm leads, and that's why that we were talking about Quora before. Quora is establishing warm leads. It's not about writing. Writing is just what we're using to get people to follow us. And remember, they're following us. We're not megaphoning them. We're not running ads to blast them away. They've chosen to follow us. So when we eventually get to the point where we want to turn around and make them an offer, they're warm leads. They've already said, we want to follow you, Pete. So if I turn around and say, just published an ebook, maybe you'd be interested. Well, guess what? Of course they're interested. So a lot of what we're doing when we're writing in Quora, it's not just trying to big note ourselves. We're trying to get those followers. I'm trying to get from 8,000 to 10,000 followers so that I've got some warm leads. So then later on, we want to be working into industry networking, and Emily talks a lot about that, and I've got to read about that because that looks pretty good. And referrals. And then, like I say, once we get to our own channels, we are talking about maximizing profits because we're not having to pay middle people. But I'm just saying you can't always jump to that. Sometimes you've got to do it through alliances. Sometimes you've got to do it through partnerships. So let's think about how we're going to do all this. So what a distribution channel is simply this process. How do we get the value proposition? How do we get this value that we create for customers? How do we get it to them? And that value, how do we get it to them, is not just in the physical delivery, but it's also in the communication. How do we communicate that value to them? How do they even know about us? How do they know even how to evaluate us? How do they even find us? You know, so that's what it's all about. How do we reach, communicate, and deliver that value proposition to our customers? That's what's called distribution channels, which makes up the P or place part of marketing. So these are the channel phases that you need to nut out. You need to nut out in terms of awareness. How are you going to, first of all, create awareness of your value to your customers? How are you going to create that awareness? And my feeling, if you haven't got deep pockets, if you haven't got a lot of money to spend on advertising, one of the best ways to do it is what Emily's doing, which is create awareness in social media. Start getting your Facebook thing happening. Start getting your Twitter account happening. Start writing on Quora. Start writing your own blog. Start creating that awareness. I think it's one of the best ways. And people get to see what you're offering, get to see what you believe in, and people start following you. It's a great way of establishing awareness. How are you going to get them to evaluate? So we need to get some trials out there. We need to get people to, it's okay, you could have.
No.
We need to get some trials organised. How can we get people to try before you buy? I think Des came along, and Des and Susie, you came along to a try before you buy, didn't we? We had a presentation night for this course, and I think, sadly, only Des and Susie were the only ones there. Now, there's about 5 people, and they looked around and said, are there going to be more? And I said, yeah, there's always more. But there was an opportunity for Des and Susie to actually do a try before you buy before they signed up to the course. Got to know me, got to know what I was about, what experience I brought, and so that was an opportunity to do some evaluation before the course. And testimonials, don't underestimate testimonials. If you guys get the chance to do something for a testimonial in these early days, do it. The testimonial will be far more than the $150 the person's going to pay you for the job. Get them to give you a testimonial, because you will whack that straight up on LinkedIn. You know, so that when people go to check you out and do an evaluation and they see those testimonials, as long as they're genuine, I certainly don't recommend you do fake testimonials, but as long as they're genuine, they can be a real winner for you in multiple ways. So work for testimonials.
Do you need to ask the person who's giving you a testimonial if they mind you putting it on LinkedIn?
You can do that in LinkedIn. LinkedIn does provide that. Would you mind giving a testimonial? I sort of don't like it. I like the one where someone's asked you to do something for them and you say, sure, I don't mind doing it, but if you can give me a testimonial, we'll call it quits, you know. And they love it because they're not out of pocket. You give them some help that obviously didn't cost you, probably some time. And that's a fair trade, I think, you know. But you can chase that. There's people that do chase that. And it's nice if someone does give you a testimonial on LinkedIn. It is nice to sort of give them one in return. If you want to chase them, Andrew, probably the better way to do it is actually go and give people testimonials, because most of them will reciprocate, you know. So instead of in a nice way, rather than asking them for it, you go and give it. But what you want testimonials about is the product. You know, I did some work for Smarterer, and they asked, you know, what's your rate? And I said, no rate, just give me a write-up on LinkedIn. And so that's what they did. And I think I leverage that because it's in the area I want to get into. It's really wonderful to have someone that's in that educational space actually endorsing me and endorsing my what I've got to give. So think about that. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm thinking about my distribution channels. How are they going to purchase? Have you thought about how people are going to purchase? Is it going to be online, credit card, cash? How are they going to be able to purchase? PayPal. What's the purchasing arrangement? What's the delivery? How do you deliver it? Do they download? Do you deliver? Do you go to them? Do you have outlets where they come to you? Is it going to be, you know, think about how that's going to work. And then for some of you will involve after sales. All of those things, all of those channel phases have to be thought through. That's all part of the placement of your product. I want to put this up, and it's not mine. I stole it from somewhere on the internet, but it was a really good illustration that we think we make sales, that the customer comes along, they come, they buy something, we give it them, and off they go. It's not true. The customer has come through a massive maze of touch points. You know, before they came and bought from you, they probably were way back here, you know, first of all, establishing some sort of need. Then they did some sort of research. They made their decision to purchase. They decided where from, which store to visit, engaged a salesperson. They bought it, set it up, used, experienced problem, contact, so forth. There is a whole customer journey. And in that journey, they have certain touch points where they touch you. Maybe they gave you a phone call. Maybe they looked at your website. Maybe they met with you and you were explaining something to them. Maybe they maybe they read something on Quora about what you were planning to do. These are all touch points. And it's essential that when the customer's hitting those touch points that they're getting a great experience. You don't want to have those touch points going bad on you, because you won't generate that leads, those warm leads that lead to sales. So it's often a really good test of someone, and this question gets asked mostly in venture capitalist places. They say, walk us through the entire journey of a customer with a need all the way through to buying your product and out the other side to you servicing them. Just tell us, how does it go? And there's amazing how many people actually haven't thought through every one of the steps. Well, first the customer would do this, then they would do this, then they would watch our website, then there'll be a link in our website that takes through to an email, and then that email address would be answered by Anne, who's the girl in the office, or by us, and we would respond to them, and then we'd follow them up with a phone call to say, you know, I need to know that, you need to know that. Your business hasn't got any credibility if you can't explain to me the whole customer journey and how you are set up to deliver that. So you need to describe your customer's complete journey and the way you intend to engage with them at each touch point. Like, how do they evaluate your product? You know, those major things. How do they get to do all of those things? I need you to be able to explain them to me. And then how are you going to use those touch points to maximize the customer's experience? When they do phone you, how are you going to make sure that that phone call excites them? When they do hit your website, how do you make sure that that's an exciting experience? You know, we need to be thinking about how we maximize the customer's experience. And if we generate that, we actually generate the cash flow or the customer flow through our business. So we've got a couple of channel options. You know, there's a reason why these channels have been developed over the last 150 years. I think I wrote something about this on Quora. That why do we go from raw materials to manufacturer to consumer? That's one way things can happen. I guess that happens in a retail shop. No, sorry, in a food business. Maybe the products are grown, they're sent to a manufacturer. Well, the manufacturer is probably more the retailer. But so that's one channel. I'll go through some others. There's a retailer you can put in between, or others you create a wholesaler. Sometimes the wholesaler goes out and sells directly. You know, Beds R Us, and they go and sell directly. Not always a good strategy to do. This one at the side is really what most of our industry is built on. So each person in that value chain, that's what they call a value chain, adds value in some way. And they add value in a way that if the retailer had to do all of those things, they wouldn't be able to cope. So we get the value they create is from their specialization, from their unique management skills, from their location. You don't want to have a retailer paying high rent and using it for storage. Crazy. Much better to have the Bidvest factory out at Murarrie, great big empty, you know, space out there, and then be delivering each day to the expensive rents in the city. So you don't want to be having your warehousing in the highest rent you could pay. You want your warehousing to be out in the cheap rent and then deliveries on every day. So that's how the wholesaler makes their money. They make their money because they save the retailer from having to carry huge storage. So each one in that value chain adds value, and they add a value in such a way that the next step couldn't do it for that price. And that's why everyone justifies their position. So these are genuine distribution channels, mostly to do with physical goods. Just comparing the two, I often go on about the online, you know, because you guys are being gifted one of the best distribution channels alive. You know, when I started my business as a specialty woolen craft shop, I only had one way to distribute things, and that was through a retail shop. And retail shops comes at a huge expense. Particularly, the thing with retail shops is they have to be located where people are. The trouble of places where people are is they're very expensive. The rents are very expensive. So we ended up, my first shop I ever did was in the Queen Street Mall, go figure. But Bob Mather, who was the shoe man, he took delight in me having a go, and so he gave me a shop in his mall in the Queen Street, in his arcade in the Queen Street Mall. So that was a really, you know, it was just wonderful that he had that faith in us. If only I knew a little bit more about business than that I do today. But anyway, and I saw the price you had to pay for that. And then I look at today about creating an online business. And Phil and me have created an online business. Well, three of them. One of them, our Now Master, which we pivoted into a resource development company, and now we've got, looks like 2 contracts are going to come and make that happen. And we're doing it all from a virtual space. We've got no overheads. We've only got wages. You know, it's just wonderful to not have to be feeding this thing. It costs us about $50 a month to keep Now Master alive, and yet it's got the potential to write hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts. So when I see online, I just think, guys, you know, as an affordable loss strategy, can't we possibly turn what you're going to do into some sort of online? If you're an experienced retailer, sure, let's do retail. If you're an experienced, you've already got a lot of experience in the physical goods, sure, let's stay there. But if you haven't, if this is your first experience, please consider what you could do online. So bricks and mortar, there's a couple of experiences there. There's a couple of things that are good about it. You know, you get obviously more customer engagement. You know, people get to try on, you get to meet them. The cons, it's a cost of capital. You end up having to commit for long term, even though the market might not be for long term. But some of the best ways to start is maybe through the markets or mobile. Is there a way, if you're so committed to doing something physical, maybe cafe or whatever, think about, can you do it in the markets? Can we just go to the markets first? Or could we turn it into a mobile product that we can take it to? Let's start there. Let's start at a price. And if it works, if it's successful, then we can use that experience to go and do something with a lot more commitment. In terms of online, obviously it's very easy to get into, low cost. One of the problems is you can't get found. You're one of 10 billion websites out there, or web pages. There's 10 billion web pages apparently. So you publish your first web page and sit back and wait for the money to roll in, nothing happens, because you can't be found. You've got no link. Google doesn't even know about you for 6 weeks. And when they do, you're on page 382, and no one goes past page 1, do you? You look at something, you look at page 1, it's not there, you go and do another search. And there's no, you know, there's no personal experience really, so it's not a good from that point of view. But a good place to start is to start with some websites, and we've talked about doing WordPress and adding in products that you can sell on WordPress, and we will get that in before the end of the course, or maybe at the end of the course we'll probably work in a workshop at least on WordPress, if not get something on MyOp as well. So we're nearly there, but I just want to ask you some questions about this and see how you go. So barriers that limit the ability of people to open a business. What stops us? What stops us from opening a business? What stops us from opening going and getting some ice, putting it in a bucket, jamming in some beer, taking it to the Treasury Casino, sitting on the corner and sell those beers on a Friday night? What are some things that stop us from starting a business? What are the barriers? Regulation stops us. So you can't do that because the liquor laws say that you can't do that. You have to have a liquor license, and so that's something that stops that. What's another one? Finances. You haven't got the money to do it, yeah? Because sometimes to actually go and do what you're planning to do, you need 100,000 in capital to actually start. You can't do it cheaper than that. What are some other barriers? Doubt. Your own confidence, yeah, that's right. You've got no market experience, yeah? So you've got doubt because you've never done it before. Yeah, fair enough. That's another one. What else? I loved it. Well, what was it? That means is that a doubt thing again?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. So lack of confidence. Any others? All right, I'll tell you what they reckon. These are the barriers. So market entry barriers, here they are, economies of scale. Some businesses require you to be able to pump out millions of units in order to be competitive. If you want to go and do DVDs, probably not a great example, maybe MP3 players, you've got to be able to pump out millions of them to get your unit cost down to a point that people would buy it. If you think you can create MP3s or DVDs at home and sell them for a price that Apple can sell them for, good luck, because you can't. That product, that particular product, needs a big factory commitment in order to make it work. Existing brand loyalty, it's hard to go out and create, Pete Basketball's Coke, and take it around to all the cafes. It tastes better than Coke. Is that going to work? Yeah, is that going to work? I was up at Caboolture today, and they had a photograph. The Coke reps were up there taking a photograph of their solid black fridge. It was Coke from top to bottom, and they loved it, all the labels pointing out. They just have brand loyalty, haven't they? They've spent a long time, guys, branding your brain. How many of you're caught in a restaurant, you're not sure what they drink, a couple of Cokes, 2 Cokes. Because you're caught, you don't know what to say, you know that you're not going to look stupid by ordering Coke because everyone carries it. So they have positioned themselves that way. So existing brand loyalty can keep you out of the game. Massive barrier. Capital requirements, we talked about that, but not so much now, but in the early days, printing presses were $1 million. That's, if you want to get into the printing business, it was $1 million. Okay, now you can start printing. If you didn't have $1 million in investment, you couldn't do offset printing with a German machine that they import, and it comes with huge costs. Switching costs. Some of you have suffered from this, that you learned one program and then a better program comes out, but you don't want to switch, do you? Yeah, because you've learnt. Shove an Apple computer in front of you and you've learned IBM or the reverse, and you really don't want to switch. You don't want to switch because there's a cost. There's a productivity cost. For the first 2-3 weeks, you're not going to be as good on the Apple as you were on the Mac, Apple as you were on the IBM. So there's a switching cost that's involved, and that, believe it or not, that becomes a barrier to entry for new people. Access to distribution channels. You might not have access to distribution channels. You might have, if you haven't got an access to Myers, the bar at Coles, or the bar at Woolworths, good luck in trying to sell to supermarkets, because that's all there is. So there's some real barriers to actually getting your product to the market. Proprietary factors, these are IPs or patents. So you might come up with this idea, but if it infringes on someone else's IP, or someone else's intellectual property, or someone else's patent, you can't go into market. You can't go and sell someone else's IP or someone else's patent. Government regulations, we talked about that, liquor licenses, and industry hostility. We talked about that a little bit with Porter's 5 Forces, and you would have seen my post that I actually went and did my own Porter's 5 Forces on coffee shops. And while 2 of them can be mitigated against, you can't mitigate against idiots that open cafes. You can't mitigate against that. And you know what? They open, they trade for 6 months, 12 months. In that time, they destroy your market. They destroy your market because they take the top 10% of the business that you make profit out of. And that's all they take of your business, but it's enough to make you not seriously profitable. If that 10% that was going to that business was added on top of mine, it would be pure profit. Because you'll hear a lot of cafe or some business owners, they say, I work until Friday lunch for everyone else. From Friday lunch to close, that's for me. Because everything else that they've spent, everything else they make till Friday lunch goes to pay rent, staff, government overheads, all of these things. And then from Friday lunch to close, all of that money's theirs. And what happens is a new business comes along, and you know what they take? Just that bit. They only take the 10%, but they take the 10% that you were making money out of. And that's the trouble with the coffee shop industry, is that it's fraught with people that think that they can go and do it because the wife makes beautiful brownies, or something. Or they've always wanted to own a cafe. So when I look at that industry, if I was advising someone, I'd probably say, get either a good advisor or think about something else. Think about supplying the coffee shop industry. Now that's smart. Think about supplying them something, but don't go competing with them, because you're dealing with people that are hard work. So we're going to do a group activity, and this is it. We're going to look at 4 businesses, and you're going to be getting together as groups. Bill? We're going to get together as groups, and we're going to look at the barriers that we just talked about then, and we're going to see how each industry has different